Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and however you are listening to this episode of the podcast, absolutely great to have you with us. On this episode of the podcast, I am speaking to Paul Foreman, who is the COO of Formica Group Europe. Formica Group is a leading provider of branded design surfacing solutions for commercial and residential customers. You might know that word laminate, which is, of course, something that we're all familiar with, and I know Formica from that branding and that marketing around their expertise in the kitchen space. I've worked with Formica in the past, working with their senior team, and I stayed in contact with Paul Foreman because we connected and hit it off. They're a €160 million turnover organisation. Formica work closely with architects and designers and fabricators, specifiers and developers. They're a company that strategically positions itself to offer new products and surfacing solutions that complement current design trends. I think the key thing for me about Formica is there's a really good chance you've either touched it, sat on it, wiped it, seen it at some point most of the time in a day when you're out and about. They're on tabletops, they're in the inside of all buildings, they're on the backs of seats in buses, they're absolutely everywhere. It's a fascinating product and a really exciting organisation. With that in mind, of course, I've got Paul Foreman on the episode today. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Leadership Bites with your host Guy Bloom, a leadership podcast, conversations, just me talking and occasional interviews. Check us out at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and tell everyone. So, Paul, great to have you on this episode of the podcast.
Hi, Guy. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Really pleased to have you on. You are the COO of Formica Group Europe, and we're going to get into how you see the world and the things that you're dealing with and facing into as we have this conversation. But just first of all, I guess, just for people that are listening in, how did Paul Foreman get to be the COO of Formica Group Europe?
Okay, so accountant by training. I joined Formica 18 years ago now, a little bit over. In the finance department, a lot of financial roles, and we've gone through a huge amount of transformation in that time. Centralisation, rationalisation of the business, restructuring. I had a number of finance roles through to the group financial controller, and then branched out more into the strategy side of the business and the non-pure accounting stuff, probably back in 2010, something like that. Moved into a business development role for the European business, which wasn't really a sales role. Normally business development roles are sales related. It was a cross-business role, looking at various different projects. And then from there, moved to our Asian business in Shanghai, which was in 2012, basically to provide additional leadership on the key executive team there, mainly financial and non-financial support on various projects. We were building a huge factory in China at the time, looking to expand the business. Made a return to the UK when our children were born in 2012 and took the CIO role on for the group, which was my first key leadership role. Big team, 95 people globally, $35 million of spend, big ERP programs. And from there, I was sat on the group exec team international division as it was. Made a lot of good relationships with a lot of projects done during that time. And then 2015, the European business was heavily restructuring from a leadership team point of view, and the business was going through a pretty rough time, and basically took the opportunity, or created the opportunity with my boss at that point in time, to move back into the European division, try to help the business. And my experience to that point had been very broad across the business, financial, non-financial, and the IT work that I was involved in, etc. And it was a good opportunity to get back into the muck and bullets of things and take on the responsibility for quite a decent portion of the business. We've got 5 factories, a couple of additional distribution centres. That knowledge of the business was really critical moving back into that role, even though we didn't have the functional experience of managing those type of things, if that makes sense. So that's a short plotted history of how I got to where we are today.
I love that, back in the muck and bullets of it. That probably says a lot more than you're saying, so thanks for that. When it comes to what Formica is, there'll be a lot of people that are very aware of who Formica is, and I know it has a long history that is quite deeply bedded in the consciousness of people, and of course other people may not know. So just for those people who just want that clarity, what is Formica? What does it do? Where would we see it, even if we don't know we're looking at it sometimes?
To be honest, honest, when I joined in 2001, I didn't even know what Formica was, and I think that there's a generational thing here, definitely, with the business. Formica's used historically primarily in kitchens applications. It's product primarily used in work surfaces, and historically before that, it was used in kitchen cabinetry, and still is in some markets. The European market in particular is very different. In Spain, it's still heavily used in kitchens, particularly in cabinets, whereas in other markets, it's not used as much and it's used in work surfaces. So kitchens primarily, but also we've got a huge business, specification-led business. So architect building a hotel picks Formica to be on the doors in the hotel, technically on some wall cladding, say in a bar area, making a feature on a reception desk, something like that. And then we've got a big piece of business in what we call the washroom sector, which is a thicker product used in that application. So the next time you sat on the toilet at an airport or a sports centre or something like that, you're generally staring at a Formica panel or potentially a competitor's panel. Let's hope it's a Formica one.
Yeah.
Exterior cladding, where one of our sister companies, Trespa, is a serious market leader in that application. They've got a huge business on exterior cladding, so you'll see that they can do various colours, wood grains on the side of buildings, etc. They're the main ones. In the marine industry, we're strong, so cruise industry, quite a big piece of business. The transport industry, buses and coaches and things like that. And then the retail sector, shop fitting, we've got various contracts with some of the major retailers in shop fitting, and also the fast food companies, hotel chains for their bedroom furniture and things like that. So it is in a lot of places, but I think everybody kind of comes back to the kitchen worktop or the tabletop, which has been the history of the product.
Yeah, because I remember seeing some old adverts that had that using, I think it was rolls of Formica for your kitchen tabletop. So I do remember those older style adverts. But I think what I'm hearing from you, and I do remember in the past when I came up to head office and saw some of that history, the range of colour and the reality of the fact that you've probably sat on it, eaten off it, touched it, wiped it down, or at some point in your life, probably a lot more than you realise, and probably even that day, you've probably been in contact with some form of either seeing it, touching it, sitting on it, Formica product, potentially.
Absolutely. The range is staggeringly big. When I first started, Formica had just merged with a company called Perstorp, and the two businesses came together and had an absolutely enormous variety of products. And that's a big selling point of the product, is that you can pretty much have any colour under the sun. We have a specialist facility to actually match colour and bring customers any plain colour they want, basically on the spectrum, which is a great commercial benefit to the business. And the guys in ops absolutely hate it because it promotes variety and proliferation of the range, where they're just one size and one thickness and all that. So we've got a staggering amount of items on our database, over 100,000 different SKUs, and the usual 80-20 rule of the big runners versus the slower ones. But that's just the nature of the business. There's a massive amount of complexity there behind the scenes.
So when it comes to being the COO of a business, this podcast is called Leadership Bites. I focus on leadership, executive coaching and team effectiveness. So that's my focus, and that's how we came into contact with each other. As we segue into that conversation around leadership, we're also in these unprecedented times where we are looking into the things that we are probably quite clear about are happening, and then there's this ambiguity about what is not just happening with our market, but just what's happening in the world. And I guess I'm interested to get a sense of what is the stuff that you're facing into. That's the stuff that we're having to deal with right now. That's the focus. That's the stuff we're trying to figure out and make sense of.
I think three things kind of jump to mind. We've got the market, and the whole economy's been hit by this pandemic incredibly hard. So from our point of view, balancing supply and demand would be the first one. Home working and the effect on the team would be the second one. And then the third one would be when or stroke if is the recovery going to happen. They would be the three things that come to mind. On the supply and demand side, all of our factories in Europe have been impacted so far, probably with Kolho, which is our plant in Finland, to a lesser extent. Definitely Valencia. We've seen obviously a big issue there with the coronavirus in Spain, same in the UK. So that we've had big effects there of having to close the facilities, social distancing in place. And the guys, I think, in all sites have been fantastic across Europe at adapting to what we've needed to do as a business, both from a leadership point of view and the teams there, but also the guys on the ground, where there's a lot of nervousness and there's a lot of apprehension about coming back after we'd closed the sites. And I think they've reacted really, really well to the situation. Nobody knows when it's going to end. Nobody knows when that recovery is going to happen. I remember one of the questions the guys had, well, why would come back now? And it's like, well, when do you want to come back? back 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, we've got a business we're trying to turn around. We've got customers that we're trying to supply. We've got livelihoods that we're trying to protect. That's a big thing, the supply and demand. I think on the home working, so we've got a European head office in Newcastle in the northeast of England, where we've got around 80 people, customer service, sales, marketing, sales just for the UK. And then we've got supply chain, raw materials, procurement, IT, HR, finance. And basically that entire team are home working at the minute. We did a trial literally the day that Boris came out and said everybody who can work from home needs to work from home, which was quite handy. And the guys in IT have done a fantastic job of making the ability to work from home. We've done disaster recovery type tests before and all stuff. It's actually, from an IT point of view, went without a hitch. And since we have been working from home primarily, and a few people have been into the office for various different reasons, it's actually worked well. But again, it's like, is this it now? What happens in the future?
I'm kind of fascinated by this. I saw a meme that went around that said, it turns out that job that you were told you could never do from home, you actually can, which really made me smile. I just wonder what that new reality is in terms of, is there that instinctive push to say, right, let's go back in the office? Or is there, well, actually, no, if you want to work from home, who cares? Where's that got to in your thinking?
So I think for me personally, I've enjoyed it to some extent. It cuts out the commute and it gives you, I don't live too far from the office. It gives me an hour of my day back to do stuff. It gives you flexibility, ability to stop at 5 o'clock, take the kids out for a bike ride or something, and then come back, catch up in the evening, and sort of vary the hours. That when I'm in the office, I was generally, it was a slug of time without a lot of breaks. So the ability to balance that out a little bit more has been good. For some of the team members who've joined recently, it's been a real challenge, I think. Try and get people who've literally walked in the door without knowing anybody, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like, well, can you talk to X or Y about that? And they're like, well, who are those people? I've never met them. So that's been a bit more of a challenge. Big projects where you've got a lot of people on calls have been a challenge, where you haven't got 7 people in a room here and 6 people in a room there, and everybody's remote and somebody's microphone's not working. It sounds like veggies being slaughtered in the background. It's like, what the hell's that? So there's comical at times and a bit of humour kicking around, which is always good. But they've been a bit more difficult, I think.
It's hard to have that big whiteboard across the whole side wall, right? And to see it, I guess. All that kind of stuff. Do you think it will shift the feel? Some organisations have said, you know what, I don't know if we need this London head office with 3,000 people in it. Do you have a sense that actually there'll be some sort of midpoint?
Yeah, I do. I think it was interesting. I saw somebody posted something this morning about they had a kind of tick if they loved working from home, if they hated it, or if they wanted a balance. And I think a lot of people were kind of ticking towards the balance, and I definitely think that's something that the whole office-based culture will move towards, where there's a bit more of a balance between people working at home, people working in the office, and I think that's probably where we'll go in the short term, given the health implications of where we are at the minute, and potentially long term as well. I think, like you say, we've proved in a few places that people can work from home doing different type of roles, and our business has went on really well in this period of time in terms of the back office stuff that happens, and it hasn't kind of missed a beat. Even with the production guys, we've had some of the planning guys and other members of the team working from home where possible, which is difficult in the manufacturing environment, where you've got the management team there, obviously. But no, it has worked really well, and I think it will take everybody to have a good look at it and come up with a plan for the future.
I have the sense that the world's trying to fight back, and it's trying to get going. A couple of weeks ago, it was shut the doors, we'll see you when we see you, and how are we going to manage this? And I still think that's true, but I do have this sense that we're trying to get the coffee shops open. So do you have a sense that people are pushing to get it going again?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you go back to March, we closed the UK plants fairly early there, and then we were probably one of the early ones to come back. Our UK plants are serving Central Europe as well, and particularly our Scandinavian market just went absolutely crazy in terms of volume demand in that period of time. And one of the reasons we brought the guys back a bit earlier, because the demand was so high, particularly in the Scandinavian, Dutch and Benelux markets as well. Then more recently, the UK customers have came back, and they've came back pretty strongly over the last few weeks or so, particularly in the distribution specification side of the business, and some of the fabrication businesses as well. The worktops business we have has suffered more. Not many people are out at the minute buying kitchens, and the kitchen studios have all been shut, which has had a big effect on our worktops business. But yeah, no, you can definitely feel it just by being out and about on the roads. There's more people out there. There's businesses obviously reopening in stages across the whole economy, and talk about different shapes of recovery, U and V and L, and all these different shapes. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens. We've seen a steady increase in the rate of orders over the last few weeks. It'll just be interesting to see if we get back to where we were in January, February and what a normal June or July would look like. Or is it going to be 10, 15% down this year? It'll be interesting to see what the numbers are.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. Everybody I talk to in an organisation is saying they have a sense that we're going to get back to where we need to get back to, but it's just how long it's going to take and then what that might mean to the people that we have within the organisation. So, COO of a large organisation, what is it that when you speak particularly about your role as opposed to, and I know you have that particular breadth of capability in terms of having done the CIO role and you've got that accountancy background, in particular as the COO of a business, what is it that you have really had to focus on maybe more than normal in this period?
It's a really good question. I think the big element of focus in this period has been adapting supply and demand and trying to predict what we're going to need. The capacity of a laminate business is a bit like an oil tanker. It's very difficult to slow down once you're going. And we can build a lot of inventory very, very quickly. And also, way behind, it's really, really hard to catch back up again because the nature of the production processes are fairly fixed. We've got a group of people that are trained on those different activities. And if we need to flex demand and capacity, it is very difficult to add capacity in quickly. So it's been a huge amount of work on trying to predict where the demand's going to go and try to match our demand and supply. Engaging with the union teams has been a key activity, and more so for the guys on the ground, to be fair. The plant managers that we have in each of our sites, they've done a great job in keeping the guys informed about where those demands and then the impact on capacity is had on each of the sites. I suppose the other piece, the piece that we're getting into at the minute, we've got quite a small team right across the business as we've restructured over the last few years or so. Just keeping everybody in the loop about where you're at. The ability to yell across the office at somebody has disappeared, and yeah, we've got some fancy tools that enable us to talk one-to-one with people. But I think a lot of people miss just seeing and hearing.
What, like a telephone?
Yeah. I'm more sophisticated than that. But I think a lot of people are looking for like where are we at the minute, and we're doing some sessions with all the teams next week, remotely, obviously with different groups, in small groups as well, which I think is important to try and help people understand where we're at, where we're going, where all the different factories have been at, where the volume's going at the minute, what are the key things we should be focusing on, just to keep everybody engaged. It's harder when everybody's not around to be able to keep everybody on the same page, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that's the one thing that I've heard, which is you can get into a flow of how you communicate, and that can be from bad to incredibly well. But then when you get something like this, even if you communicate incredibly well, that is the norm. And yeah, it is the minimum, because even if it's great compared to everybody else, it's what we're used to. I wonder if you've noticed a deeper need from people, and you know, my answer's kind of in my question, but I'm wondering if there's a sense of fear or uncertainty. Leadership is really asked to lead at this point. And I just wonder if you're having a sense of that as within your peer group, within that senior team.
Yeah, I think one thing I forgot to mention before was one thing that has really changed from a leadership point of view in this period, and we've gone through a little bit of restructuring with that group, is every day we've got a call with myself, our CFO Neil, our Chief Marketing Officer Phil, and the CEO Eric. And that call sometimes lasts 10 minutes, so we've got anything big to discuss today, and it's something nearly an hour. And that's been really helpful, actually. It's been good just to kind of give everybody the perspective of what everybody else is on. We can clearly share messages between that group and then try to cascade those messages down to the rest of the organizations. That has really, really helped, because we normally wouldn't do that, because we'd be in and around the office on different discussions and meetings, etc., and that would just be kind of natural. But it's made it a bit more punchy because we've got quite a spread business. So we've got two factories in the UK, factory in Valencia, couple of distribution centres in Spain, distribution centre in France, one in Sweden. We've another manufacturing centre in France as well, and then a plant up in Colco. We rely on the guys locally, given the fact that every man whose dog doesn't speak English, is to get the key messages out there to various people, so everybody's on the same page and we can kind of cascade that message down. Majority of our comms will generally be done in English, and that we rely on the guys there. And the guys have done a good job with taking those messages and filtering them down through the organisation. But at the same time, from a leadership point of view, you're trying to check in with people. You miss the day-to-day. Some people come on every single time and they use their video, and some people every single time don't use their video, and some people are a bit mixed with that, as they're eating a bowl of cornflakes and don't want you to see them spitting cornflakes out the side of the mouth and things like that. So it's difficult because you hear their voice now and again, or you see an email, you don't see the person.
Yes, you can dial into a Zoom meeting, but you aren't seeing them sat in the office, that physical posture, or maybe just the way that they're with somebody else. Yeah, so there is that touch point that is not quite there. In terms of your learning, have there been any mental notes to self?
It's been keeping everybody in the loop, particularly direct reports that I've got with a big pool from the guys that are running factories to guys that are running teams internally, IT, HR, etc. Definitely keeping in touch. That's been a challenge. There's been a lot going on right across the business. Two things going on at once. We're in a turnaround situation and there's a lot of pressure on the numbers and big programs that we've got, and we're dealing with a pandemic at the same time, and balancing those two things off has been a big challenge. Managing upwards as well with parent company, helping them understand what we're doing, how we're doing it. There's been a huge amount of effort that I think nobody really sees in the organisation, but that takes a massive amount of time to help them with information and data and making sure they're comfortable that we're managing things. They're based in Holland. They would normally be across. They've spent a lot of time in the UK over the last year or so since they purchased the business, and they're missing the seeing and hearing it. You have somebody over the phone or over an email saying, oh yes, we've done X and Y, but there's nothing like seeing and touching stuff that's been done or I can physically see to cement that appreciation of what's going on.
Have you had any experience of video fatigue people talk about? Somebody said to me the other day, I used to have breaks in between meetings. I had at least an opportunity to walk to another office or another building, but it's all gone now. I just seem to be, he actually said, I think I might get deep vein thrombosis if I'm not careful.
I found some of the meetings, to be honest, is a little punchier. You know, you walk in an office in a room with a few other people and people chat for a little bit and before you really get into it, and that doesn't really work as well over the WebEx. You can't really have that level of banter, if you know what I mean by that. It's almost, we get to the point faster and the meetings off to the point and regimented, and then the ability to stand up, walk downstairs, make a cup of tea, come back upstairs, etc. is no, I haven't seen that, to be honest. I'm lucky in the fact I've got a small study. I'm in here by myself. The wife's looking after our two children, but I've seen others where they're sat at a kitchen table and there's kids running around the background. That must be incredibly hard going to try and do that. I was talking to a friend last night where him and his wife are alternating shifts, and some of them are looking after the kids at the start of the day and then back end of the day. That sounds really hard going, to be honest. So I think I'm lucky in the family setup that we've got and the physical setup. But I imagine it being really challenging where you haven't got distinct space where you can concentrate as well at the same time. Somebody
actually did say to me, he said, I don't really see that people will want to go back to work. And I said, well, that's because you live in a 5-bedroom detached property, my friend. Yeah. And especially if you're more city-based, you and another with 1 bedroom and a living space, both working. Or just the whole thing of even if there's no children, you get up, that person that the whole relationship really got huge benefit from not seeing each other until later that day.
Yeah.
and then you're in a room. But yeah, put 1 child or a dog in there and it does manifest a whole different thing. Just looking forward, Paul, as you look at the next 12 months, comms is obviously a big thing that by the sounds of it will continue. What's your mindset? What are you thinking as you look at that next 6 to 12 months?
I think initially, if you go back to March, right across the business, it was about survival. It was about personal survival, and some of our team members have various health issues that were isolating themselves. And I'm talking about survival from a human point of view as well as a business. The word I would use to describe the kind of early period was definitely survival. The orders dropped off a cliff in some markets with people that they needed to go into isolation for periods of time for various reasons. As this has now become the norm for a period of time, and you see businesses try to reopen as we have, we've put things in like one-way systems and enhanced hand washing and cleaning facilities, etc., etc. We've done a huge amount of stuff on all our sites to get back going. We've been able to capture some demand where others haven't been able to supply materials, which has been good because it's a key part of our recovery strategy is to sell more, which has been good. There's a few opportunities that have came along that we've been able to take. We've been through a massive transformation, particularly on our North Shields site, of a huge level of investment, and that investment is pretty much completed now, and we're into the fine-tuning of a couple of the final assets there, and the guys have done a great job throughout this period of time because we had a rough start to the year, and then we've had a good level of continued improvement from that. From a long-term point of view, the futures look rosier. If some of the demand particularly comes back and we get a good recovery volumes into the business, it'll leave the business in a good state over the next 12, 18 months or so. We've got a few synergy projects with our parent company that we're working on, which again will be fantastic for the next few years or so.
Great. So it sounds as if you have a sense of the road ahead and you've got that focus on where you're going with it.
Yeah, the last couple of years in particular have been a huge amount of time on the North Shields site. We've spent nearly £40 million on machinery and equipment and the facilities on site. The engineering team there done an unbelievable job of getting all those things bolted to the ground, and the production guys come in and grab them and get them up and running. And it's been unbelievable to go through that process. It's probably something that I'll never do again in my career, that level of investment and that level of change on one site. We've had people come back across and see what's happened at that site from 2, 3, 4 years ago. They're absolutely blown away by the transformation that's taken place there. And that site now is really set up for the next 20, 30, 40 years or so. It's one of the most modern laminate sites in the world. It's not perfect yet, and we've still got a lot to do and a lot to fix. We're with a good team there, and they know where they want to get to, and there's a good path forward. As we get to the end of that project, which has dominated a huge amount of my time and the team's time there, we've got a lot more, not smaller in totality, but they're more fragmented projects to kind of manage, and that's the challenge going forward. We've got a number of smaller things that we need to execute, maybe not worth as much from a financial point of view, with smaller groups and teams that we need to execute on. Some of them are more technically focused than they are big, heavy engineering type projects. So we're just moving into a different zone now. The Broadview business who purchased Formica last year, very technology led, but a very strong technology background, and they bring a lot of mental horsepower, particularly in the manufacturing space. So that's been really interesting to see, and we need to adapt and take some of those things on as we move forward. And then commercially, they've had a lot of success over the last few years because of that technology background with new product development, and that's something we're looking to harness. We've got a number of projects in flight already, lies in some of those things. So from a revenue point of view, which is a key part, as I touched on before, of the transformation of the business going forward, there's a lot more green shoots there than there was a couple of years ago.
Fantastic. My last question for you then, Paul. I often quote Red Reverend, who said that learning must be equal to or greater than the change that is going on around you. That's relevant to a business, it's relevant to a team, and it's relevant to individuals. When you look at yourself, do you have a sense of where you're trying to take yourself in terms of your personal development? That's a question I ask of every leader. You've got to where you are, but what's that future version of you looking like as you look at your personal journey, where you want to go, and what the needs of the market or the world might require from you?
I think it's a very good question. I think for me, historically, I've been very hands-on, and I think everybody is in their more junior career because they're doing a lot more stuff and doing less thinking and strategy stuff. It's the nature of a more junior role. I think as I've moved on, I've still liked to keep my hand on particularly some of the data, some of the analytics myself. I do like learn by doing a lot of the time, particularly on the data side and understanding things. It's sometimes very difficult to hand that off when you think, yeah, I could give this to you, but is it going to be good enough? I'm not going to learn as much from it. But sometimes you just got to draw the line and say, no, I don't really need to. It's your bag now, and you need to learn it in the same way that I've learned it. So balancing off the want to jump into those sort of things, and I've got some very, very talented people around me who are very, very good at that sort of stuff, and picking the people is a critical part of a leadership role, where it's basically at the end of the day you select guys and girls at the next level down to be the leaders of their teams, etc. And that's a critical thing, making sure that you're not stepping on their toes.
Almost not robbing people of the opportunity to grow because you know the answer, I guess.
Yeah, that's I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. The historically way I could have done something, watching somebody else go through that learning process and getting there themselves as opposed to just giving them the answer is really important. So I was talking to the CEO of Broadview yesterday, and he used a very good analogy for the laminate industry. It's like a fast car, and if you know how to drive it really well, it's brilliant. And if you don't know how to drive it, it can way off course very, very quickly and crash everywhere. And we've got some talented people internally that really, really know how the business runs. And then we've got some newer people who haven't got a clue, and they've just literally walked in the door and they don't know the difference between X and Y. And melding those two together, so we get some new ideas of how to do stuff, new ways of working, mixing them with the experience that's been around for 35 years, that has immense value, is part of the challenges, I think, with the people side of things.
Do you know, I hear you say that, and it's almost like sometimes when I do an exercise with a senior team to challenge thinking, almost there's the obvious way of doing things, and then there's that element of just having an idea that might not seem like a good one, but the answer sits within it. It's easy to negate stuff that doesn't seem the obvious way of, or the way that's done before. So I imagine that is the challenge. We need new blood. We need new thinking. It needs to learn how to do it. But at the same time, we don't want to negate their crazy ideas, because actually there might be an absolute gem in there. So how do we balance that? And that's hard work to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people come in and you get an idea and it's like, and somebody else, we've tried that before. It's like, well, did we try it before and it completely failed? Or did we try it before and it worked? And
yeah. Or did we try it before in this context?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, well, listen, Paul, thank you so much. It's been lovely to speak to you. We've stayed connected over the years. And once I started the podcast, you were one of the first people I turned to get on, primarily because I thought you might say yes. So thank you. Thank you for that. And what people don't know is the shenanigans we had pre-call of...
it was completely perfect.
It was completely perfect, yes. And luckily, your IT literacy got us here. Some people I've done this with have turned around to me and said, no, I've not heard of Chrome. What's that? And I've gone, okay, this could be a really difficult conversation.
The one thing I learned in my IT days is turn it off and turn it on again. 99% of the time, it generally fixes the issue.
Built an entire career on that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so I'm going to bring us to a close. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated.
Thanks.
Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you to Paul Foreman. We've got lots of really interesting guests lined up. We've got Kath Possemeyer, who's the CEO of the recruiting group for the British Army. Next week, we've got Craig Brooks, a really great character. I thoroughly enjoyed that episode. I think you're going to really enjoy that as well. So hit the subscribe button, tell everybody about us. We're a new podcast. We're trying to get up and running and off the ground. We're getting a lot of interest, and I love that. Really help us out if you could hit that subscribe button and tell everybody about it. See you on the next episode. That's it. Subscribe so you keep updated on new episodes. Visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with us and find out more. This